This is episode 2 of Ruminate, a podcast about the opportunities and challenges that technology presents us with every day. I'm John Voorhees, your host, and along with me today is my co-host, Rob Lewis. Hi, Rob.
Hi, John. How are you?
Very good. How are you doing today?
I'm very well indeed. Got a couple of little bits about feedback that we should jump into first.
Sure, let's do that.
Carry on. So we've now got an email. If anyone's got any feedback for us, that email is contact@ruminatepodcast.com. And if you're more into the hashtags on Twitter, you can use hashtag AskRuminate, and that'll be going into a spreadsheet for us to take a look at and answer any questions.
Yeah, we thank Jason Snell for that idea. I think he's the first one who originated that with Upgrade, isn't that right?
Yeah, I pretty much think so, and seems like everyone's using it now, so we should probably jump on it as well.
Yeah, seems like a good idea to me. So we have some follow-up from our last episode, and the first thing I wanted to talk about is, of course, the Pizza Hut cheeseburger pizza that Rob ate. I did a little more further investigation and found that this actually originated in the Middle East, and from the Middle East it made its way to the UK, and then the UK dumped it on America. We'll put some links in the show notes, but there's a good article on Consumerist that described the pizza as a grease-filled sunflower, which that's really probably the best description I could give it. Taking a look at the picture, it's just a horrifying mess and then another article that I read described it as extraordinary and repulsive. Sorry, Rob, but that's what the internet thinks of your pizza.
That pretty much reflects what I thought of it as well, to be fair. I still ate it, but I think I would agree with most of that.
Yeah, they did their best in photographing it. I mean, it's not round like a pizza, so I don't know if you could really call it a pizza, but it's shaped kind of like it's as if you took a pizza and grafted on a bunch of little mini cheeseburgers around the edge, little satellites to the main pizza, so that it looks like the cheeseburgers are orbiting the pizza sun in the center, something along those lines.
We'll put those links in the show notes so everyone else can be as disgusted as I am with myself.
Yeah, exactly. I also had a few links about ad blockers that I just wanted to pass along. Some interesting things that I saw during the last couple of weeks, that I thought people might want to check out at some point. And one is, we raised briefly on the last episode how relatively easy it is to create your own ad blocker if you've got any development experience. And there's a nice project on GitHub called Block Party, which is a simple iOS 9 and OS 10 ad blocker that you can, if you know your way around Xcode, you can download the project, compile it, and put it on your phone or on your Mac. The hard part here, I think, is not so much creating the ad blocker itself, but it's making sure you have all the list of sites and trackers and things that you want to block as part of the ad blocker. And if you look at this project, there's a list of about 1,600 things that it blocks, which is a pretty extensive list. Have you taken a look at that one, Rob?
Yeah, it's quite interesting to see kind of the huge amount of different sites that you need to block. And I wonder if, you look at something like this Block Party project, I wonder how, different content blockers are going to differentiate themselves. Crystal app, which was the one we spoke about last week, presumably will be available on launch if all goes to plan.
Right.
I'm not sure where the differentiation is going to be between these different ad blockers. I guess you might only want to block pop-ups or maybe only ad tracking, but for the most part, if somebody installs one of these with all this huge listing, I can't see any reason you'd ever want to switch.
Yeah, I think the differentiation is going to come from things like the granularity of the settings. Do you want to just block ads? Do you want to block trackers? Do you want to block pop-up videos, that sort of thing? I think that's, I'd like to have that kind of control over any ad blocker that I'm running.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure exactly how these work on iOS, but I'm hoping that I'll be able to kind of turn them off on a per site basis as well, kind of like, the way the Chrome ones work now, because I certainly wouldn't want to be blocking writers that I read all the time, like Marco Arment and, Jason Snell, people like that. I wouldn't want to be blocking their ads, which just aren't intrusive at all, really.
Right. Now, also, when you mentioned the Crystal app, that I think is made by a guy in the UK, and I just saw this morning that he's got some facts up on the Murphy app's website. So we'll put that in the show notes. I guess he was getting a lot of questions over the last week about his ad blocker Crystal, and he's got some answers here. It does look like it's going to be universal. It's going to have an OS X version. Multiple languages are supported, and that it's going to be, as he puts it, a premium app, whatever that means. So they're going to charge something for it.
I think that's good though, because if we're all paying for it, maybe whatever it is, $2, $3, whatever, at least we know that it's it will be sustainable and we'll get updates and things like that in the future.
Yeah, you don't have to convince me that paying for apps is a good thing.
No, absolutely not.
I have no problem with it whatsoever. So that's that project. A couple other things I saw. One was in the Next Web, there was an article by Owen Williams that covers a lot of the stats that we talked about from the Crystal app. What was kind of interesting about his article was particularly there were some GIFs just showing side by side the loading of a large page with Crystal turned on and with it turned off. It's obviously not very scientific, but kind of an interesting way to approach it and look at, really demonstrate the differences.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, if you're interested, it's well worth taking a look at that link. And as you say, the GIFs on their own kind of explain what these content blockers are going to do for the mobile web and browsing on iOS. But again, that'll be in the show notes. Our show notes are at roomnatepodcast.com/2.
Very good. And we have actually 2 more links on ad blockers. I mean, this is a topic that just doesn't seem to die at all. There was a good episode of Vector where Renee Ritchie interviewed James Thompson, who's the developer of pCalc, which is a great Mac and iOS calculator app that everybody should have if they don't already. But James talked a lot about ad blockers and what that meant from a development perspective as well as a user's perspective. So check out that podcast if you're interested in hearing his perspective on it. And the final thing that I wanted to mention was some, I guess they're infographics really that visualize the number of links and things that exist on some of these large websites for advertising and blockers and whatnot. This is from Adam Bintz, I think, Crafty Dino on Twitter, and if you take it's a little hard to describe, but it's just a huge web of sites that connect back to. In this example that was the most egregious that he found, I think, was the TMZ website, tmz.com. Did you see this, Rob?
Yeah, I did. I guess you've described it the best. So it's kind of a web or kind of linking all these tracking scripts together, and it's a complete mess. I mean, this is just one website, and they've got this huge amount of trackers and things like that. So again, we'll pop that in the show notes, and if you want to take a look. Right,
it's kind of color coded by publisher and ad and privacy and different types of things that all originate from TMZ, and it fans out from TMZ in this incredibly large web of dots. And the endpoints are basically the media companies where the code originates from. So it's interesting to see. It's really kind of amazing how much it shows you exactly why some of these sites are so incredibly slow on mobile. Is that they're phoning back to each one of these sites individually and downloading some data associated with it. So, and I think that's it for follow for today. I mean, today we wanted to talk about a couple of things, but primarily, we've got an iOS launch coming up next week. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the things surrounding that, and maybe Rob, you could start. I thought, why don't we talk primarily first and foremost about how we watch the live stream. I mean, I think to me, it's kind of interesting how people do this. And I mean, I've got my particular setup, and I know you do as well. What do you like to do on a launch day?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, I'll watch it. If they're live streaming it, I will make sure I watch it, assuming that I've got the time. It's not so much to see kind of the facts of it. Like I think we can all kind of guess, and we kind of know at this point what's going to get released. But I find them quite interesting and entertaining. A lot of the time, a friend of mine will come round and he'll watch it with us, and my girlfriend will sit there and watch the bit she's interested in and ignore the rest of it. And I'll have Twitter open sometimes so I can tweet snarky things, and which I think is what a lot of us are doing. How about you, John? Do you watch it with anyone or just yourself? Or
well, unlike you, I mean, I'm at work when this happens. I guess it's usually about 6:00 your time, right?
Yeah, except on the weird times when the time zones are in weird places. But yeah, it's normally about 6 or 7 we get it.
Right. For me, it happens at noon, which is actually pretty nice. Because what I do is I usually just set aside an hour and a half during lunch, grab something to eat, sit at my desk, and watch the live stream at work. And I'll typically have a text document open or take some notes. My kids are very interested in what's going on, and I usually take some really high level notes and text that to them at the end of the event, and then I'll do the same. I'll keep Twitter open, but usually that gets going so fast that I at some point just stop watching Twitter and just watch the live stream. I view it almost like it's like a holiday. I mean, I figure I'm not going to be super productive today. I'm going to set aside a big block of time and kind of soak it in, and it is for the most part a form of entertainment for me. I mean, we all read the websites, and no matter how hard you try to avoid the spoilers, it's hard to avoid Mark Gurman. I mean, you've got articles out there that have detailed everything from what the camera is going to be, what the Apple TV is going to have, what the remote's going to be, what the iPad Pro is going to look like. All that stuff is out there, but it's still fun to watch. I do miss a little bit though the surprise of it all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if looking at the list of things that Mark Gurman has kind of reported on that allegedly are going to be released, we've got the iPad Pro, which Mark Gurman is saying may or may not happen. We've got a new iPad Mini, the new iPhones, Apple TV. There's new watch bands. And within each of those categories, he's got really small details about every little thing that's going to happen. And like you say, it's kind of hard to avoid these rumors without just turning the internet off, especially with the kind of people we follow, tech bloggers and journalists, things like that. It's just impossible to not know what's happening anymore.
Yeah. What do you think about the watch? I mean, do you think it's just going to be bands, or do you think they're going to do anything with the hardware?
I can't see them doing an update to the actual hardware yet. I mean, it's only been a few months since most people got their hands on one. I think watch bands is a really good call, especially coming up to Christmas and that time of year where people are just looking for gifts and things like that. And I'd say, especially with the sport bands, you're fairly limited. If you want a sport band, you've kind of got black and white, or you've got these really bright colours. I think they really could do with some more muted colours, because a sport band's really comfortable.
Yeah, I love my sport band, and I agree with you. I mean, it would be nice if they had a little more variety in the colors. And I don't see hardware either on the watch at all. At least new hardware at this point. We've only had the thing for 4 or 5 months as it is.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on the band conversation, like the sport bands cost, I think they're £40 over here. I think they're like $50 in the US.
Right.
But beyond that, if you want something different, I mean, that jumps up to $100, $150, right up to $200-300. So there's not really anything in the middle for somebody who maybe wants something a little bit more understated and kind of muted on the colors.
Right. It'd be interesting to see if they do more bands for like the space gray aluminum model, because right now the only one you can get that actually matches the space gray case is the black watch band.
They must have data on the color preferences on iPhones and the iPads as well in those different colors. So they must have known it would be fairly popular. Although I guess in some way, I mean, I've got the Ready Pink sport band, which has obviously got the aluminium the clip on it, and it's not too much of a problem on a match with my space grey one. But as you say, it would be nice to have some that do match as much as the black one matches.
Right. Yeah. No, it doesn't really bother me either particularly, but I know people that does kind of drive people a little bit nuts when they see that the like the little bit that goes through the hole is silver instead of black. But yeah, I don't think it's particularly a big deal myself. Going back to the iPad for a second, I am really skeptical about something launching this week on the iPad. I mean, I think it's going to happen. It seems like an awful lot for one event to have new iPhones, an Apple TV, an iPad, and even maybe some what are, I guess, watch bands, which are accessories for the watches. It just seems like too much to me. And history is, at least in the past, the iPad has always come out. Well, I shouldn't say always, because the original one did come out in the spring, but lately it's been more of a separate event in October.
Yeah, it's interesting to think. I mean, we've had some significantly long events the last couple of years. Even without this much stuff. And if they really want to do justice to this new alleged Apple TV plus a new iPad in a new category, this iPad Pro, I mean, we could be looking at a 2 or 3 hour event if they were to really do it properly and do them justice on these new items.
Right. I mean, I guess there's a couple of things. One is the venue they're using this year is a lot larger than they've used in the past, which I think is telling, and I think it's telling from the standpoint of the Apple TV, though. Maybe from the standpoint of the iPad, but I suspect that we're going to see people who have been invited to this event that are beyond the usual tech blogger, tech news journalist group of people, that you're going to see more media people, I guess Hollywood types, if there's something big coming on an Apple TV that incorporates any kind of service. And I know that there's talk that the services aren't going to be ready, but I could see that being one reason that perhaps the venue is as large as it is. The other potential one, I suppose, is the iPad, but I'm not as convinced that that's the case. I mean, this iPad, I think, is going to make a big difference in a way that hasn't been entirely anticipated. I mean, I think that there's some talk that there's a separate keyboard that's being developed by Apple, which I have kind of mixed feelings about. I mean, I sometimes I feel as though if you're one of those people who has a computer, has a keyboard case on your iPad, why don't you just have a laptop? But if it's easily removable, then I think in a way that answers the question, in that you've got the best of both worlds. You have the ability to use it as a tablet, a pure tablet, and you also have the ability to type on it. And I've been tempted to get one of those, but I've never really. I've used keyboards. I've used the existing Apple Bluetooth keyboard with my iPad, but I've never used anything that kind of locks onto it as part of the case. Have you?
No, I mean, I think we spoke a little bit about this last week. With the typing is one of my main issues. So it sounds like maybe a keyboard would fix that. But on the other hand, like I really just like being on a Mac or even a Windows PC or something like that, where I can just flick between everything. And if I want to have, I mean, obviously we've got the split screen coming on the iPad Air and presumably for the new iPads. But if I want to have 5 different windows open that I can see, I can do that, and I can flick between different things, and it really just, it's not something for me that I'm really that interested in. And I also look at the prices. I guess the nearest comparable thing is probably the Surface, in a way. Like, that's this kind of hybrid between a laptop and a tablet. And once you've paid for a decent keyboard for it and actually bought the tablet itself, I mean, you're getting really close to something like a MacBook Air or maybe even a low-end MacBook Pro or something. It really just doesn't compute for me.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. I mean, I think it depends on your use case, right? And I mean, part of the problem I think people have in discussing this, at least people who are interested enough in technology to do a tech podcast is that we're power users on some level, right? You do web development and I do some iOS development, and you could never do either of those things really effectively on an iPad. However, I do sometimes. I mean, there are days when I'm not doing things. I don't need my MacBook Pro, and it's kind of heavy. I mean, I love it. It's 15-inch MacBook Pro, but I haul it back and forth to downtown Chicago nearly every day and do some coding on the train and whatnot. But there are days that I just don't do that, and there's days that what I'm doing is I'm writing a blog post, or I'm doing maybe I'm putting together an email to my email newsletter people on MailChimp, or I'm doing something else like or reading or researching, whatever it is, getting ready for this show. And I just don't need a Mac for that. In those situations, it's really nice to have my iPad because it's roomier than doing it on my phone. And I'm pretty excited about the new iPad. I kind of see it as the culmination of a lot of things that have been coming down the road for a long time in terms of the integration of both iPhone and iPad software. I mean, we got universal apps a long time ago, and I think we're seeing the death really at this point of separate iPhone and iPad apps, because now in order to work with split screen, you've got to have an app that can be resized to really any size whatsoever. And so it's not going to make as much sense going forward to have different size iPad or not different size, but different apps for iPhone and iPad. I kind of wonder what we're going to see happen with apps like Launch Center Pro or OmniFocus. I think Drafts. Those are all apps that come to mind immediately that have different apps for both iPhone and iPad that they charge separately for.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at it because, on the web, you start talking about web apps and things like that. We just have the one web app. You make it responsive and make sure it works on small screens and big screens, things like that. But it's always just one code base. Whereas my understanding with the iOS App Store, there are some things where, you've got kind of auto layout and things like that. I think that's right. And
right.
But you still have this idea of, this is the iPad version and this is the iPhone version. There still isn't this kind of middle ground where you just load everything. And I think the iPads still have the 2x mode thing where you can kind of load an iPhone app on an iPad. Is that right?
Yeah, they do. They still have that. And now really what you do, you choose when you create your project for creating an app. You can choose iPhone only, iPad only, or universal. So it's really up to the developer to decide what that app is going to have. If you choose universal, then you've really only got you've got one code base, but you may have multiple assets in terms of the UI that might they'll vary depending on whether you're looking at it on an iPhone or an iPad. One good example is the split screen. They call it split view controller, which they introduced, I think, with iOS 8. There's always been kind of a split view controller, which is the view you see, for instance, on the iPad when you're doing mail, where you have a column on the left with your emails and detail on the right. When they redesigned split view controller, they basically allowed it to collapse on itself. So if you're looking at one of those on a phone, you'd only see the left-hand column of emails, and the detail is effectively hidden underneath it and doesn't display until you select one of the things in the list. So instead of being side by side, they're effectively on top of each other. So that when they're on top of each other on a phone, it looks just like what was traditionally called a table view, just a long list of data that you scroll through and pick things. So that's one way the APIs have made it easier for developers to create a universal app that works on both iPhone and iPad, but yet looks different. I saw yesterday Greg Pierce, who develops Drafts, on Twitter, talking a little bit about this, and so he was kind of lamenting the disappearance of the ability to do a separate apps. I mean, you can still do them. The problem is that now it's just harder because now that everything has to resize, it seems that that Apple would prefer that people make universal apps, which I think has really been from a policy standpoint. That's been the message that developers have been getting for a long time. And one point that he made, which I thought was a good one, is that what it does by forcing people towards a single app, it eliminates some of the uniqueness of iPad app design, because it is a little bit like, as you said, doing a web app and doing some sort of responsive design where your UI has to kind of adapt for anything from an iPhone on up to presumably an iPad Pro. And it's just hard. It's harder, not impossible, but it's harder to have unique differences between those two apps when they're running effectively the same code base with the same UI elements. So you kind of follow what I'm trying to say there. It's always hard to describe these UI things when you're when you're talking in audio, but there's definitely a push and pull between how the desire for unified apps that'll run anywhere and the ability to customize between and differentiate devices and make maybe an iPad app more powerful than an iPhone app because it's got a bigger screen and is designed for a different use case.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess the other part of this is, if the new Apple TV that is, allegedly coming, possibly have an app store. I mean, I think at this point they have to have an app store on it just to compete with the other devices. But if this is going to have an app store, what kind of apps is it going to run? Does it run iPad apps with a kind of cursor on the screen, which it doesn't sound particularly good, but it's certainly possible that you'd be able to run iPad apps on it. And at that point you're talking 1080p TVs or even 4K. Not sure why I'd buy 4K at this point, but possibly you would. We've got these huge screens that presumably will have apps. Maybe it'll run iPad apps, maybe there'll be separate apps, but again, the same code base, and you just have, some slightly different assets and things like that. What do you feel about this new alleged kind of Apple TV? Have you got Apple TVs at the moment?
Yeah, I do. And I've, I know a lot of people have had problems with them, and it seems kind of popular to slam the Apple TV, but I actually really like it. I've had it since the very first one that came out. I had I had that for a while. Then I had a second gen Apple TV and held out for the longest time waiting for an update, knowing that one was inevitable eventually. Finally broke down because I had the second gen one that was 720p, I think. And last fall, I finally broke down and got the third gen one with the 1080p, just because wanted a little bit better resolution watching movies. I frankly don't have any problems with it. I mean, yes, it will reboot once in a while, although it's very rare for me. Usually, if I have problems with it, it's more with things like Netflix on a Friday night or something, or a Saturday night when everybody in the world is watching Netflix simultaneously. And it'll hang, or it'll reboot itself, or it'll not be able to access the stream or something like that. But I've been very happy with that. I usually primarily, I guess, for Netflix, listening to music because I've got it hooked up to a home stereo, and renting movies is a big one for us. And occasionally I'll buy a TV season and watch something like Walking Dead on it, something like that. Now, one reason I think I have fewer problems than some people do is that I've got it hooked up to directly to Ethernet, so I don't have any. Wi-Fi is not really a problem for me, and I've got a nice, constant, fast stream of bits to the box.
Yeah, I've got mine set up the same. Actually, I just kind of like you say, it's a lot easier, and it tends to avoid a lot of problems with Wi-Fi. Like you say, you've got 3 Apple TVs in your house. I've gone the other way. I have some kind of Sony Google TV box. I've got an Apple TV 3rd gen. I've got a Amazon Fire TV stick. I've got a Mac Mini hooked up to my TV, and then I've got all the PS3 and the Xbox 360.
Right.
And I'm kind of on this quest to find something that will do everything I want. Like you say, kind of Netflix is fairly ubiquitous at this point. It's kind of on everything. That's fairly easy. But then I've also got Amazon Prime Video, which I sometimes want to access, and I can only get that on the Fire TV or the Xbox 360. and then I've got my own content, things that I've downloaded that are on the Mac Mini. So I can either watch those through the Mac Mini or possibly on Plex on some of the devices, but not all of them. And the Apple TV falls into this weird category where it's really useful if I just want to do Netflix or maybe AirPlay content or music, but then because there's no app store, I can't get a Plex app or an app for Amazon Prime and things like that. So I'm hoping that this new Apple TV will have an app store so that I can have access to all of this different kind of stuff on one device.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. I have kind of gone a slightly different direction. I have tried other things. I have tried Plex. I've got a Roku stick because I thought it might be nice having Amazon Prime, but I think because I'm a Prime member, so I've got that available to me. But I think the reality is I don't watch it very much. I'm fairly deep into the iTunes content, so I'm kind of locked into that, and it's too much of it's so fiddly dealing with the Roku and the other boxes and things. I've just kind of resigned myself to using just what's on the Apple TV because it doesn't cover all my needs, but it covers a lot of my needs.
Yeah, in the UK actually there's a big one that really is missing from the Apple TV, and that's BBC iPlayer.
Oh, right.
We'll get access. In the UK, you can access the BBC iPlayer to rewatch stuff. But the only solution to watch that through the Apple TV is to AirPlay it from an iPad or from the iPhone app. And that's fine, but to a certain extent, I don't really want to turn the Apple TV on, then find my iPad, load up the iPlayer app. It'd be really nice if that was just on the Apple TV itself. And I think that's probably the kind of thing we'll see if the Apple TV does get apps with this new release. Yeah,
it'll be interesting. There are a lot of things that'll be interesting to see with this. Will it be open to anybody to make apps? Will it be just certain providers, who like Netflix or Amazon? Will Amazon be on there? I mean, there's no reason why Amazon couldn't be on there now, but they aren't, and they haven't been. Who will BBC be on there? What's going to happen with all that? And also how these are going to be developed. I think, I have a hard time seeing this being part of any kind of an iPhone, iPad project. I just don't think you're going to start a project in Xcode and say, I want this to play on iPhone, iPad, and Apple TV. I mean, the UIs are so different that I don't see how that would work. Although, maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens with all that.
Yeah, definitely. So iPhones, John, are you planning on getting a new iPhone this year?
I am. My iPhone. I am still on a 5S. I'm not. I don't get my phones off contract, at least not yet. Although I've been tempted to, and I've had my 5S for about 2 years, so I'm coming up on what is typically the way the contracts work in the U.S., which is subsidized for 2 years, and canceling early subjects you to high penalties. I think mine actually doesn't. My contract doesn't run out until about a week after the phones will probably launch. I think the best guess is that we'll see the announcement on the 9th. They will be available the following Friday, if history is any indication, because that's typically how it's worked. And I think that's maybe the 18th or so. And then my contract runs out around the 24th. So I'll be ordering a phone. How about you?
Yeah, funnily enough, I'm on same as you, 5S. Probably had it just under 2 years, but the battery, I can't even get it to last all day at this point. So I kind of get to work, charge it at lunchtime, and then it will last me till I go to bed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll be upgrading as well. Again, another advantage of being in the UK, the pre-orders that you all have to get up for in the middle of the night are at 8 o'clock in the morning for us, so we can just quickly get up, order a phone, and then I can go to work.
Yeah, no, that's nice. I actually can't do that only because I get my phone through my work, so I can't convince the guy who orders the phones to get up at 2 a.m. to do it, strangely enough. So I'll be doing it during the day, and hopefully they'll have some left. Though one of my kids is due for a phone, so I'll probably try to be a good dad and get up early and order him a phone at 2 a.m.
So I guess I've got to ask, 6S or 6S Plus?
I don't know. I am very tempted by the Plus, and I think if I had to guess now, I think that's probably the direction I'll go. And I think the reason I would do that is I do almost everything on my phone. I mean, I've got a decent commute both ways each day, and for whatever reason, I've always found myself using the phone more than I do my iPad. And then maybe that's just because I'm already listening to podcasts or music or something on it, and I'm pull it out and it's easy and especially in the confines of a train to use. So I found it to be the device that I go to first, even if I have an iPad or a laptop with me. And having the extra screen real estate and battery life, as well as a better camera, if that if the camera's a little better than the 6S as it was between the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, those things are all very attractive to me. I'm the same way with my battery on my 5S. It's been 2 years and the thing is shot. I can leave the house at almost around 100% and have my phone down to about 45 or 50% by the time I get to work an hour and a half later, because I do a lot on my phone. I'm usually listening to podcasts and music, especially if I'm listening to music and it's streaming. I'm doing that over Bluetooth headphones, so I've got that going. And then I'll be on Twitter or reading something, using the web. I mean, I'm usually got 2 or 3 things going at one time that are drawing on the radios, and that will wear down the battery very, very quickly. How about you? Do you have any plans for one versus the other?
I've had a play around with the 6 Plus, and that it's just way too big for me. My girlfriend's got the 6, and even that, I kind of hold it, and I'm like, this is almost too big for me. So I'm definitely won't be going for the Plus. I think the 6S will be perfect for me. I mean, to be honest, I'd just be impressed to have a new phone. You know, like you say, the battery on these 2-year-old iPhones is just so shot now. So yeah, I'll be ordering one of those. I'll hopefully be able to get in on the pre-orders and get that on launch day. And then, depending on what the Apple TV's like, I may order one of those as well. So this is always an expensive time of year for us people who want to upgrade.
It sure is. I mean, I really like the S generations. I know, we'll get the usual articles written right after the event that Apple's doing because they didn't change the look of the phone, because no one seems to, at least the mainstream press doesn't seem to recognize the kind of the pattern of the last several years. But the S generations tend to be really good. They've usually worked out a lot of the any real serious bugs, especially the kind that are bugs that interface with hardware issues, because the hardware is not changing substantially. I mean, the chipsets are changing, but they tend to do a really nice job of bumping up the camera and everything between generations, and speed for that matter.
Yeah, I've been on the S generation. The first iPhone I got was the 3GS, I believe. And I got really lucky with that, actually. I just decided on launch day, do you know what, I'm going to go and get one and see what it's like. I managed to get one on that day, and that was a jump from a Nokia N95, I think, which was quite possibly the worst phone ever made. So yeah, I got the 3GS on that, and that was at the time I was on a 2-year contract, so I kind of then jumped to the 4S, and then when I got my current 5S, I cancelled my contract and just bought SIM-free, because then I managed to drop my actual phone contract down to, I think I pay £11 or £12 a month.
God, that's nice.
It's a significant saving, and it's just nice not to have this huge amount of money coming out of the bank, every month. I just do this once a year, big payment, and then it's done. And if I want to upgrade in a year to the 7 or whatever it's called, I can do so, and not really worry too much about penalties and things like that.
Right. Yeah. No, I was actually a latecomer to the iPhone. My first one was the 4S. Before that, I had a work issued BlackBerry, which was awful. For everything except for email. And I kind of had the John Syracuse thing going. I would use an iPod Touch, and I was really good at finding Wi-Fi hotspots. I'll tell you. because I everywhere I knew the train stops where there was somebody's house nearby had an open access point. I had all those Wi-Fi spots saved into my iPod. But yeah, that's how I started out, was with the 4S, which was a nice phone. I really liked that one. The other thing that I thought I wanted to mention briefly too about this launch, which I think hasn't gotten a lot of press because it's more on the technical side too, but it's going to be interesting to see the quality of the iOS 9 apps that we get. Not as much was changed year over year in terms of the APIs, which is good, and it makes life easier for developers. But iOS 9 still isn't supported by TestFlight. TestFlight's the beta software that Apple introduced. I think it was at WWDC in 2014. Now, TestFlight was a company it's a product from a company that Apple bought before that. Originally doing beta testing was really tough on the iPhone, and it was a hassle, and we're kind of back there right now. Because what you have to do is collect UUIDs, the unique identifiers for the iOS devices, from the people who are testing for you, and then you have to, and those are a string of random letters and numbers, maybe 30 characters long or so. Then you have to go to the website, the Apple developer website, input those UUIDs into the device, into a section of the website, then add them to a provisioning profile, then download the provisioning profile, then get the provisioning profile in the hands of the beta tester so they can install it, and then they can get your app. I mean, there's a lot of steps involved, and companies started popping up once that system existed to streamline it, and that's what TestFlight did, as well as Hockey App. And they do streamline it they did streamline it to some extent. They automated the sending of emails and pulling UUIDs off of devices and sending them back to the developer. They automated that process to some degree. But when TestFlight was bought by Apple and they integrated it into the developer tools, it made it a lot easier, because it was really at that point no different than it was as easy as sending an email to someone to get them on your beta list. They didn't have to have any idea what a UUID was. They didn't have to have any real technical knowledge, and they didn't have to go through a bunch of steps. They really just had to tap a button and download your app. And that was wonderful. I mean, it was limited. Some people still preferred Hockey App because it has other SDKs for crash reporting and tracking and other things that you can do. But strictly from a beta testing standpoint, it was incredibly easy, and it was better for everybody. It was better for the developer. It was better for the testers. And when iOS 9 betas started coming out, TestFlight just wasn't there. It didn't work. And I think a lot of people assumed, well, it's not the first beta, maybe it'll be in the second. Well, it's not the second, maybe it'll be in the third. And I spent a good part of the summer just waiting around for it, and finally caved and went back to Hockey App, which has been, which is just kind of painful, especially after having used TestFlight for a while. I mean, it's good, it works, but it's a lot more work both for me and for the people who I want to test the app. And that's kind of a long background to get to what I think could be a bit of a problem, which is I suspect a lot of iOS 9 apps are going to be very lightly tested going into this rollout, because for a couple of reasons. One is a lot of developers waited and didn't test for many weeks, assuming that TestFlight would come out, and it's still not out, and we're days away from the launch. And I think even if you have used Hockey App, gone to some alternative like that, it's just hard to get people to download it because people are used to TestFlight and they don't want to bother. I know I've experienced that to some degree, and I think a lot of developers are gonna end up with very few testers as a result.
Yeah, I've done some beta testing in the past. And I think I'd have to agree, with what you said there. If somebody said to me, "Oh, can you beta test my app?" Like, it's significantly easier for me to just say, "Yeah, here's my email," instead of, "Oh, I've got to find my UDID. Oh, how can I do that? Oh, do I plug it into iTunes, or I can download one of these apps that will give it to me and tell me what it is, and I've then got to send that back to you, and you've got to then deal with that." I mean, it makes it significantly difficult for the people who, for the most part, are doing you as the developer a favor. They're not really getting anything out of it. Yeah, they get to see something that's kind of not released yet, but there's no huge value to them. So obviously you need to make it as easy and as painless as possible. And it's a little bit of a concern as I'm not an iOS developer, so for me, I can kind of look at it from the standpoint of downloading apps. It's worrying to me that these apps that come out for iOS 9 just may not be tested very well, and they might break on the new devices, or they might break on my old phone because they couldn't find somebody with that specific model to test it on.
Right. No, and it's not clear to me why we don't have this. I mean, it's a little bit of a mystery. I don't know if it's a hardware thing, or if it's or if it's features that haven't been disclosed yet. But I don't think it would be that. That doesn't seem to make sense to me. So I really not sure what's going on. I know it took a very long time for TestFlight to really get up and running to begin with, and maybe they're just having trouble with getting it to work with iOS 9.
Maybe all the engineers are just working on the iPad Pro, and somebody's just forgotten about it. It's just on a little post-it note on their desk, and they haven't quite got around to it yet.
Right.
So we've got a little bit of a few more UK weird stories. Based on, obviously, we had the story with the man with the shoes last week. It's going to get slightly more weird this week. There's two guys dressing up as famous people. The first one is a chap who has dressed up as Prince George for 7 days. He's kind of tried to replicate his clothes and the poses, and just kind of take photos to replicate, the things that Prince George has been doing.
And what was the purpose of this? What was he trying to accomplish?
He doesn't really say.
It's just art, right?
It would appear so. I mean, it's described as a bizarre experiment. But he's been recording the outfits, with the photos and stuff, and he's been writing down the reactions he gets by writing them in a diary. I can't really work out what the point of this is. I'm not sure what he's getting out of it. As you say, I guess maybe it's just an art piece or something like that. But yeah, it is very, very strange.
He's going to have a great Tumblr or something, right? With all of his diary entries.
I would imagine so. Take a look at the pictures. We'll put the link in the show notes, especially the first picture. The guy just very, very strange.
Yeah, well, it's extremely creepy. The grown men should not be wearing toddler clothes. I'm just gonna put that one out there.
I think that seems like a pretty good rule there, John. I'll get that written down somewhere. We'll start selling posters, motivational posters.
Yeah, exactly.
The second one is this at least has a semi reason for doing it. There's a university from a lecturer from Kingston University in the UK. He's launched what he's calling a fully immersive David Bowie research project. He claims he's trying to kind of work out how David Bowie felt when he was, in the 70s and the 80s and things like that. And the guy is spending an entire year dressing as different stages of the career, as well as eating the same things that he did and things like that. It's all very strange.
Just kind of trying to understand David Bowie by being David Bowie, huh?
That's pretty much his justification for it. There's quite an interesting part of it, though, is he says instead of doing cocaine, he's switching that for energy drinks. I'm not sure how accurate that's going to be. I mean, obviously, I'm not suggesting he should take the cocaine, but it just kind of seems like energy drinks aren't necessarily going to be a replacement for that.
No, I think that this is a failed experiment already. Look, if you're going to do it, you got to go all the way.
Absolutely.
This is just not this. No, that doesn't work for me at all. Looking at him here, he doesn't look anything like David Bowie. He's doing a very bad imitation of David Bowie.
Yeah, he also said he's doing all his own makeup. Specifically, I think it's the second picture in this article.
All right, that one's Yeah, that one's a little better.
Yeah, it's a very strange story.
And he likes to take selfies, obviously, I see. Looks like he's using an iPhone.
I can only assume that nobody wants to take the photos for him.
Yeah, no, that's probably true. Oh God, that's terrible. I don't know. He needs some work. This looks like just a bad Halloween costume that I would have come up with.
Yeah, well, maybe that'll be the new thing for Halloween this year. People will just pick a rather than doing the traditional costumes, they'll just pick a random celebrity and do terrible outfits for it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, should we wrap it up for this week?
Yeah, sure. Just remind everybody, if you'd like to get in contact with us, you can email contact@ruminatepodcast.com, and the website is ruminatepodcast.com. You can also use the hashtag AskRuminate on Twitter if you want to ask us a question or send some feedback. And you can find me on Twitter at John Voorhees, and my website is squibner.com, SQUIBNER.com. How about you, Rob?
Okay, yeah, and you can find me on Twitter at RMLewisUK, or my website is roblewis.me, and we'll be back in another fortnight.
Very good. Talk to you later, Rob.
See you later, John.
Bye.